News and current affairs are hardly a laughing matter, especially these days, but don't tell that to tonight's guests. They are all practitioners in the fine tradition of poking fun at the powerful, which is an oddly tricky task these days, in spite of an avalanche of material. What's a comedian to do? Well, let's find out from Leanna Kersner, comedian, analyst, and host of the new online show, Lady Bits. I'm afraid to ask. Ian McIntyre, Toronto-based television writer and comedian who's worked on programs including the Beaverton and Degrassi Next Class. And Erica Petkov, PhD candidate at the University of Toronto, working on a dissertation about political satire, civic attitudes, and youth political participation in Canada. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Nice to have you here, I think. Anyway,
I'm glad I've already made you uncomfortable.
Going to see how this goes tonight, yeah. Let's find out a little bit more about who you are and what you do. Leanna, I want to start with you first. Call yourself a YouTuber. I actually know what that is. Analyst, rehabilitated former journalist. Name a couple of things that you've done that we might know.
Ed and Red's Night Party, a.k.a. Ed the Sock, which was the longest running and possibly most controversial show in Canadian history.
You are half responsible for Ed the Sock.
Possibly 3/4. The really offensive stuff was mostly my writing. Okay. I got us in trouble a lot. But now I'm doing a lot of feminist analysis of video games, which is funny. And that's a tightrope and a half. You know, the name of the show, Lady Bits, was designed to have exactly the response you had. And that's why I'm so interested to talk about this, because satire is the art of making people comfortably uncomfortable to me. And that's sort of where I inhabit. So thank you for getting it.
You're more than welcome. Ian, television and comedy writer, stuff that you would have worked on?
I worked on the first season of the Beaverton show, and we're working on the next one right now.
Actually, we got some of your work. Should we show some of this?
Oh, geez, of course.
Well, okay. We got. Let's put a few. Sheldon, you want to bring these up? We got a few headlines here that we can share with the viewing audience. This is you. Beaverton is like Canada's Onion. Can I put it that way? Here we go. 50,
That's how we tried to put it, yes.
50% female cabinet appointments lead to 5,000% increase in guys who suddenly care about merit in cabinet.
Because they always said that the best satire is long-winded and clunky. Yeah.
Ontario government reminds drought-stricken province to conserve water for Nestle. That's funny.
That's a good one.
Kathleen Wynne's poll numbers inch up to -24%. Right? Hadfield comes home to $1.37 million Rogers phone bill. That's the astronaut Chris. That's funny stuff.
Oh, thank you.
I would say that's funny stuff.
We had to stop writing things about Chris Hadfield because apparently too many people thought they were real.
Yeah.
And they would ask him about them in interviews. And then his son, who does his social media, politely pointed out to us, hey guys, we don't mind you doing this, but it makes a lot of work for us. Maybe don't.
Why do you love satire?
Oh, it's, I mean, I've always loved comedy, but satire is comedy trying to make a point. And all of my favorite comedy growing up has mostly been satire. Like as a kid, I loved 22 Minutes. I used to watch it and go to tapings with my dad. And then I loved Saturday Night Live and Weekend Update, and then on up to The Daily Show, which I was obsessed with for years and years and years. So.
How's Trevor doing?
He's doing? I still think they're trying to write Jon Stewart's show for Trevor Noah,
I agree.
which doesn't work. Yeah,
Okay.
but I think Trevor Noah's brilliant.
Yeah, character voice is so important, especially in satirical comedy. And I mean, this is something I had to learn is most of my role models are male. There's not many women doing what I do.
Sam B.
And, well, yeah, but
Sheeta Bomb.
she wasn't doing her show when I started.
Right.
She was still on The Daily Show. And so finding that voice that makes sense, you know, finding that voice that matches what's coming, the mouth it is coming out of, and other bits, it is a real challenge. And I agree that you can't just transplant writers. Stephen Colbert, I think, is another example that he tried to clean up when he jumped formats, and he's slowly come back into kind of a middle ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it works much better.
Let me, you know, Erica, I think I'm glad we have an academic here, because I think we need to understand if there is a distinction between comedy and satire. Are they the same thing?
No, I mean, satire is inherently political. In the course that I taught humor and politics this summer, we teach the students sort of about the difference between, they call it Horatian and Juvenalian satire. Horatian being, from ancient Roman poets, Horatian being more kind of lighthearted, mellow, gentle prodding. A lot of the Canadian content, 22 minutes, that kind of stuff, is traditionally more in that mold, versus Juvenalian, which is more angry and biting and full of scorn and kind of savage ridicule. And a lot of the American content, I think, is a lot more in that mold. So certainly there's a difference, and not all satire is the same. There's a range in terms of the satirical spectrum. I don't know if Ian would agree, but I think the Beaverton is probably a lot more edgy than a lot of traditional Canadian content is.
Yes, it's very Horatian? Juvenalian?
Well,
That's what I
more
meant.
angry and biting.
Can we know who those are named after?
Those are words that I know.
Horace and Juvenal, just ancient Roman poets.
Okay, okay, good.
Yeah, just throw in the academic bit there.
No,
but,
that's why we have you here. Yes, indeed.
But I think, I mean, the Beaverton, I think, is a mix, but I think it's probably more edgy than a lot of the stuff that Canadians are maybe used to.
We try to, although we have some very light, stupid stuff as well.
Yeah.
Does satire, though, Ian, feel different in the era of Trump?
Oh, for sure.
How so?
It's so hard. Because it's just a constant, like, fire hose of things happening, and things that are so absurd that, for one, it's hard to make a joke that cuts through, because now that we have Twitter, everyone's making jokes constantly, and by the time you come up with a joke to make about Donald Trump, 1,000 people have already probably made it. So you really have to think of, like, what's the most obvious joke, then what's the next most obvious, and you really have to challenge yourself to come up with anything original. And for two, there's just so many people on TV as well doing it. Like you mentioned the late night shows now, there's 5 shows that are on nightly that you're suddenly competing with to try and have an original take on Donald Trump, who is also so absurd in himself that he's resistant to satire in weird ways.
Is Trump great for business?
Yes and no. He's dividing people to the point that it's actually making comedy harder. That's where I think it's harder. The fire hose is our own fault. You know, the fact that we became a blunt instrument instead of a scalpel. That's just comedy writers being lazy and going for the easy joke because we're on a deadline and, oh my God, I need a funny here. That is our own fault. The climate of offense, the climate of a grievance, has not grievance, but a grievance.
People feeling aggrieved about various things.
Yeah, the aggrieved entitlement complex that has, enwrapped North America has become a real problem for satirists, because both on the right and the left, the basket of deplorables hit the right, and that comment that Hillary Clinton made got totally inverted to original meaning because they sliced off a piece of it. But then the left, with this language of microaggressions and problematic content, satire exists firmly in the uncanny valley of problematic content. You're not quite a problem, but you're not Lily White either. You're here, you're Ishtar in the underworld.
You're Ishtar in the underworld?
Yeah.
Boy,
Another
there's
reference
some
I'm familiar with.
Serious references that go back well before you were born, so well done.
But it involves nudity, so it's in my wheelhouse.
Because you brought this up now, I want to show a clip here. This goes about 1.5 minutes, but I thought we need to let it breathe here because, first of all, she's fantastic. This is Tina Fey doing her thing and getting, we will discuss afterwards, in a bit of trouble with doing her thing. Okay? Have I set this up all right? Sheldon, roll it, please.
Then we hear that there's 9 more alt-right rallies planned around the country this Saturday, including one in New York City in Washington Square Park. And part of me hopes these neo-Nazis do try it in New York City. Like, I hope they try it and get the ham salad kicked out of them by a bunch of drag queens. Because you know what a drag queen still is? A 6'4" black man. But at the same time, I don't want any more good people to get hurt. And I know a lot of us are feeling anxious, and we're asking ourselves, like, what can I do? I'm just one person. What can I do? And so I would urge people this Saturday, instead of participating in the screaming matches and potential violence, find a local business you support, maybe a Jewish-run bakery or an African-American-run bakery. Order a cake with the American flag on it, like this one, and just eat it, Colin.
Wait, I'm sorry, how is that supposed to help?
Love is love, Colin.
I'm sorry, what?
And then next time when you see a bunch of white boys in polo shirts scream about taking our country back, and you want to scream, it's not our country, we stole it. from the Native Americans. They stole it from the Native Americans, and when they have a peaceful protest at Standing Rock, we shoot at them with rubber bullets, but we let you chinless turds march through the streets with semi-automatic weapons.
Okay. A bunch of questions emerging from that. First of all, Erica, when you did you watch? Is that the first time you saw that?
No, I've
seen it before.
I've seen it. Yes.
When you watched it for the first time, did you think it was funny?
I did think it was funny. What was interesting was the backlash that followed, and I think tying it to sort of my own research, it shows the power of satire, that people put so much stock in what Tina Fey had to say. They were hoping after such a tumultuous week in American politics, what's she going to say? Is it going to be catharsis for us? Is she going to express how outraged we all are? And a lot of people felt let down, felt that her message was, well, let's just ignore it and eat cake. And a lot of people were saying, well, these are not normal times. These are times when a young woman was killed in Charlottesville, when congregants in a synagogue are afraid for their lives because there's men with fatigues and guns outside chanting Nazi slogans. So they're saying, we can't do nothing. That, you know, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing.
But did they expect a comedy show not to be funny in dealing with this?
I think Tina Fey would probably reply, I'm just a comedian. Like, I'm not the savior. I'm here to make you laugh and feel better. So, I mean, there's certainly validity on both points, but you can see just the stock that people put in it, of how important it is.
Is this the first time you saw this?
No, I
before?
thought the night, I mean, Twitter blew up, sheet cake, hashtag sheet cake, and I was,
say that word again?
Hashtag sheet cake.
Sheet cake.
Sheet. Yes.
This is a new word, sheet caking.
Sheet caking is now a verb.
What does that mean?
Well, the sheet cake is like a slab cake. That was what she was mawing down on. And a woman eating something that tastes good on television is still a subversive gender performance.
It's an FCC fine, right?
Well, probably, yeah.
Did you find it funny when you first watched it?
I did, and yet I thought, oh, wow, that is so brave on so many points. She just went for it. Like, she did things. Any comedian knows when you get into politics that way, especially racial politics, transgender politics, you know, LGBT plus, all the letters you want to add after it. You are on dicey ground. You are going to step on a landmine.
And did she?
Of course. I mean, everybody lined up to blow her leg off. You know, it was, oh, she didn't go far enough. She went too far. She's saying do nothing. No, she wasn't. She was responding to a very honest sense of impotence that people had. We know we're not supposed to go out there and fight people. I mean, Antifa has done terrible things for the PR of the left.
This is the anti-fascist movement.
Yeah. It allowed a false equivalency to form, and that's what she was kind of responding to in a very funny way without coming out and saying a word nobody can say without defining, right? And so she did it. But then, of course, she's offending the very people she was making fun of. That bit was not for the activist class. That bit was for everyone else who's sitting back in their living rooms going, what is going on? I don't understand any of this. This is all just angry and unpleasant. And cake is delicious. You know what I mean?
Ian, when you saw it for the first time, did you think it was funny?
I just wanted cake. Yeah, I thought it was really funny. I feel like I read about it on Twitter before I saw it. So I was already primed to be like, oh, am I going to be grumbly about this? But I do agree with you. The thing that I took from it was that she was going on about the impotence that we all feel, and you know, I'm going to do something really silly in response to it, which is
yelling at a cake,
destroy this cake. Absolutely,
yeah.
Which is great. But then at the end, it really did switch. It's like the very last point that she made comedically was, and then also, what if we ignore these guys? And I feel like that overtook the entire comedic thesis that she had.
Erica, let me ask you about one moment in it where she said something to the effect of, you know, at the end of the day, a drag queen is still a 6'4" tall black guy. And then they cut to the wide shot of Michael Che nodding and kind of in on the joke and so on and so forth. You know, there were a bunch of so-called think pieces written after this thing aired saying that's being very disrespectful to trans, to make that kind of joke, to trans people. Is that a legitimate interpretation?
I think if that's how people responded to it, then that's their interpretation. I think everybody interpreted it differently, but it just goes to show that satire can offend liberals too, and that, you know, liberals are often divided amongst themselves, and satire can sort of sometimes exacerbate that. I mean, a lot of think pieces came out to your earlier point about Trump that has left-wing satire caused the rise of Trump, and I think, I mean, we can debate the extent to which that's true. I think it's probably overstating a very complicated problem. I mean, political scientists will be debating for years how to explain the rise of Donald Trump. But left-wing satire can certainly alienate its allies. And how people interpret it it's their own sort of purview.
But satire is supposed to, by definition, offend, is it not?
Yep.
So are we entitled not to be offended by good satire?
No, we're not entitled to anything. I mean, check your privilege, man. Like, that was satirical. It's interesting because, I mean, there are divides within these communities. There are trans activists I know who drag is not trans. Drag is a performance, trans is a gender identity. And so I think she deliberately, again, stepped on that grenade because there's a catharsis, perfect word of, yes! Someone said it. It doesn't matter if it's right. It doesn't matter if it's moral. Part of satire is saying these uncomfortable things that people are feeling so we can air out the smelly, dirty gym bag laundry, right? And I think she did a lot of that. She really flipped over the rock in that bit. And that is sort of what the left is terribly afraid of, because I think there's a lot of, virtue signaling and political correctness are all, right-wing co-opted terms now, but it is a real issue that Gloria Steinem back in the 70s was saying academia has a problem, that we use all these words amongst ourselves that no one else can understand.
I will say, though, if someone is going to go out there and say, yes, I've finally said it, I am allowed to say this thing, then I don't see any reason why particularly someone who's like in the drag community or something like that, they are therefore allowed to also not like it.
Oh, no one has to like stuff.
For sure, yeah, I don't want to put that word in your mouth.
No matter how hilarious you are, somebody is not going to find it funny. I mean, this is something we deal with, but she didn't just hit drag queens.
Yeah.
It was black men as well, and the fact that they had to pan out and have a black man give his approval to the line, I'm like, oh, that was a meeting. You can see the breakdown when you've done it.
But when you write satire, is part of your mission to offend somebody out there?
I mean, you're trying to make a point, and you're trying to...
We're not getting a wide shot here, but go to a wide shot for a second, because that's what she's been doing for the last 30 seconds. Yes,
I always feel like offend is a weird thing, because I could say a horrible thing right now and offend people, and I don't have to be making a point when I do it. I could just say something awful. But I feel like when you're writing satire,
that's offense for offense's sake.
Exactly.
You're talking about something different.
With that, though.
No, but I'm asking about something else.
But it's also, at least when I personally write satire, I feel like that's not what I'm necessarily trying to do. I'm not just trying to make someone feel crappy or feel bad or get worked up. I really do. If I want to go after a target, I feel like I want to make a point doing it.
Have you got one off the top of your head, some joke that you told for the purpose of being satirical, and somebody did take offense, and here's why?
There was one thing with that. We wrote an article in the Beaverton one time. I personally didn't write it. And it was the point that we were trying to make was against government inaction. When it comes to missing, murdered Indigenous women. That was the target we were aiming for. And then the article went up, and a lot of Indigenous people and activists called us out and said, we feel like this is punching down at us.
Which was not your intention.
Which was not our intention.
So how did you deal with the blowback that you got?
The first instinct was to be defensive and be like, but we had good intentions and we didn't mean it. And then we tried to listen, and at the end of the day, we just said, you know what, they got a point. And we aimed for a thing we missed, and we apologized, and we took the article down.
It happens.
And that's the thing, yeah.
The thing is, I mean, some of the great historical satire, Oscar Wilde jumps to mind. I'm like, oh. I mean, Oscar Wilde was the one, he went to jail for his lifestyle, right? But also in The Picture of Dorian Gray, it's that whole thing of you go too far. And the very thing that Oscar Wilde was satirizing at the time was Dorian Gray had just committed murder, but the real crime in elite society was to accuse him of murder, not the murderer himself. And we are in the age of you go too far, sir. Yes, we go too far.
That's your job.
We have to go too far. We don't get progress unless someone goes too far. It's like kneeling for the national anthem. Some people think it goes too far. Yes, that's the point. We're talking about it.
You're going to be a great guest when you learn how to come out of your shell someday. You know
I'm
that,
very,
eh?
very introverted.
I can see that.
So shy.
I can see that, yes.
Yeah,
you wanted to say.
Yeah, if I might add, I think there's sort of the cliche that satire is supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And so I think there's this idea amongst probably a lot of liberal and left-leaning people that satire is our outlet. And so when they see themselves as targets, it's harmful and it's offensive to them. And we brought up this question in my class as well, is why is satire so much currently the domain of the left as opposed to the right? The students had a lot of interesting examples. Some of them said, well, liberals are just more funny. I don't know how you would quantify that. I don't know if that's true. Some of them said
bias in that result.
Certainly, certainly, I don't know how you would measure that. Some of them said that the right-wing satire that they have seen, to your point about punching up or down, tends to punch down, and then it doesn't come across as funny. If your target is oppressed groups,
that's not as funny as punching up, obviously.
I think a big part of that too is that, for my money, satire is sort of inherently anti-authoritarian.
Yeah.
Whereas conservatism, anti-elite, exactly, and conservatism by definition is sort of embracing authority.
But tell me this, do you think, Ian, we now live in a time where it's harder to be funny because there will always be somebody out there who takes, legitimately or not, offense at whatever it is that you end up saying? And they have big megaphones now.
I wouldn't say it's harder to be funny.
No?
Yeah, it's always hard to be funny.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always been hard to be funny.
Way more work than you think, for sure.
Especially backwards and in heels.
What about that? Does it feel harder at this particular time in our history? Because if you shoot and miss, as you just described, the torrent of abuse you're going to take on social media and in popular culture can really be quite intense.
Yeah, I think yes and no. I mean, we're seeing a proliferation of satire now. I mean, it started before Trump. People think that, well, Trump was sort of the catalyst for this proliferation of satire. But it really started in post-9/11 period with Jon Stewart and Colbert really filling the void where sort of mainstream media outlets were not really asking the tough questions in this period of like hyper-patriotism and whatnot. Returning to your question, sorry, I lost track there.
Just
well,
whether...
to jump in on that, you brought up sort of the left wing being funny. The first thing I thought of, Joe, well, the left wing's funnier because we suck at elections. But
it's the trade-off, yeah.
It's a trade-off, yeah. But also, I mean, it's about who is in charge, who is elite. Yeah. And after 8 years of Barack Obama and now with the rise of Justin Trudeau here, the right feels like it is punching up. When it goes after this idea that, it's punching down. No one thinks they're punching down. And that's the important thing. The rise of Trumpism was punching up. That's what they felt it was. This not truly because, Trump did very well in college-educated whites, college-educated white women. It's not the working class, but it is that identification with the white working class, those roots of the people that have been upwardly mobile and now suddenly feel like they're not the kings of the castle or the queens of the castle.
I think we're going to show some more work here, shall we? Here's the Beaverton, which you may know something about, Ian.
Oh, good.
This launched this was just after, I think, the U.S. presidential election, and we got a clip from that show, so let's have a look. Sheldon, roll it if you would.
Welcome to the Beaverton, the new show that will make the apocalypse we are currently living in slightly more palatable. I'm Miguel Rivas.
And I'm future road warrior Emma Hunter.
Our top story, sad news as the United States was found dead last night in its North American home. Investigators have ruled the death a suicide, the result of 300 million gunshot wounds to the foot. The nation was only 240.
Recently, neighbors became concerned when the nation started arguing with itself, developed type 2 diabetes, and yelled at brown kids to get off its lawn.
America leaves behind its children, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands, and its estranged stepchild, Guantanamo Bay. In lieu of flowers, the family asks that you send bombs to the Middle East.
Yikes. Give us some of the background around that.
That, as you saw on the date, was the night after the U.S. election. And the Beaverton, at least in the first season, everything that we did was pre-taped well in advance. So what the Beaverton writing staff did was they wrote 3 versions of the opening to that episode. They wrote a what if Trump wins, a what if Hillary wins, and a what if it's like too close to call, and it's just, we sort of have an opening that's not about anything specific. Huh. And of course, everyone in the writer's room was like, obviously Hillary's going to win, because we all agree with each other. But then, as they were writing the Trump thing, everyone kept saying, like, it's a shame no one's ever going to see this Trump bit. There's way funnier jokes in it. And then the night, obviously, it was the premiere of the show, and they ran the Trump bit. And
What happened to the other 2 bits?
Lost to the mists of time.
Is that right? So those never saw the light of day.
They're off in the alternate universe where Hillary won and everything works.
See, I was not one of the people that thought she was going to win, and it was because of the political satire surrounding her. I was really bothered by Kate McKinnon's take. See, that bothered me.
This is Saturday Night
I didn't
Live.
like that. Yeah, Kate McKinnon's take on Hillary Clinton actually put me off. She won an Emmy for it, so obviously I'm in the minority. But what that was making fun of a woman with ambition. That's what they were skewering. Oh, ho, ho, isn't it funny that a woman thinks, oh, she's entitled to be president? Tee, hee, hee. That was the joke they punched over and over. I'm going to be president. And I'm like, she's a great performer, but that is not funny.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I honestly felt like Kate McKinnon's impression, I think it's very funny. It put me off a little bit, but I felt like, the opposite. I felt like Kate McKinnon's Hillary impression was, isn't it hilarious how prepared and ambitious she is? But I thought that they were doing it in a loving way, like the way that you poke fun at a friend kind of thing.
Because they were so sure she was going to win.
They absolutely were, for sure.
And that can throw it.
Right.
You know, especially in a change cycle. You do not make her the establishment candidate. You do not make her the sure thing. And the fact that, oh, make fun of a woman who's prepared, make fun of a woman who's professional, make fun of a woman who is qualified. You know, we have this idea of the lone gunman, the guy who makes it look easy, who comes in and just wings it. I mean, why do you think Rachel Maddow rambles on her show in a blazer, short hair, and, you know, no makeup on her web content? It's because she's wrapping herself in this male performance that Hillary did through pantsuits, but like, oh, we're over you, Hillary. Just go away.
So take us back to the Trump show. What kind of feedback did you get?
Oh, that was a very good point. Sorry to interrupt.
You don't have to be so nice.
But I'm Canadian, I have to.
Trump show.
I'm the East Coast as well, I really have to. On the Trump show, so that night, if you'll remember, like every late night satire show basically came out like it was a national day of mourning and stared at their hands and were like, what are we gonna do? And the Beaverton just had the luck of having taped our show weeks in advance, and we came out with really hard jokes. Like, I think that was the only comedy show that was on that night that was just like joke, joke, joke.
Do you think you went harder because you thought it didn't matter?
For sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Everyone was just kind of topping each other, being like, "This is what an absurd thought experiment.
No one's gonna see this.
No one will ever see this. We'll show it as a gag reel on YouTube." And but the truth is, that night, because it was the premiere, we were all at a party watching the premiere of the show, staring at our hands. Just
how many YouTube hits did you get?
Oh, a bunch? I forget. It was very well received. It went to like the front page of Reddit, but again, it was because I think our show was the only show that night that was making jokes.
Right.
We actually showed that clip.
You showed that clip in your class?
Yeah, we showed that very clip in the class.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's that dance like no one's watching phenomenon. I mean, that's good comedy when you're just telling jokes because they're funny and you're not worried about the impact. That's why it was so brilliant. You know, you never thought anybody was going to see it. That's good writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You took the limiter off your inhibitions, right, and just went for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was also that hard thing of like writing jokes for the Hillary section. Of course, we want to do just as hard satire, whoever we're aiming at. But the truth of the matter is, a Hillary Clinton presidency would have been less crazy. So the jokes are not different crazy for sure, but like a more subtle crazy.
Is it at all problematic for you that you're a Canadian outfit and most of your great material is going to come from south of the border now instead of north?
Oh, that just makes us have to try and find funnier things about Trudeau. There's the challenge.
We're actually in a good place because people around the world now know who our prime minister is, which is a rare thing.
Exactly.
That is true. Do you, let me ask you, Erica, whether you can tell from your research whether Canadians have the same level of interest as Americans do in political satire?
So I actually conducted a survey in summer of 2016, a cross-national survey, asking, do you watch satire? And asking a whole bunch of questions related to that. What effect does it have on your attitudes? And about 48% of the total population said, yes, we watch satire, which was good news for my own research. Otherwise, there'd be no, if it's 2% of people said yes, then my premise would be a bit mistaken. But about half the country, in terms of millennials, a bit more than half, about 54%. And in terms of the whole sample of ages ranging from late teens to 90s, and cross-country representative sample, it was about 46% female, 50% male said, yes, I watch satire. For millennials, actually a lot more women than men are watching satire. 68% of millennial women said they're watching satire versus 32% of millennial-aged men, like born from the early 1980s to late 1990s.
What do you infer from that?
That's a good question. I have to dig deeper into that.
Millennial men watch less TV overall. They're playing video games.
Maybe that gets to your content.
Worthwhile spending
So
their time.
Satirical video games. Got it.
And they exist.
Yeah, for sure.
They exist.
Yeah, but to the Beaverton, for them, I looked at also, do you watch Canadian content? Do you watch American content? What are you looking at? And actually about 30% of both the total sample and the millennial sample said we look at Canadian content only. A much smaller percentage said American, and the biggest chunk said we look at Canadian and American.
Do they distinguish between the two? Is there a difference they notice?
Probably not. I mean, the biggest segment they're watching, Jon Stewart, and they're also watching Rick Mercer, the biggest segment, but about a third only looking at Canadian content. I think Canadian content has really sort of taken off in recent years because there's an appetite for it as the success of the Beaverton show.
We've definitely found, particularly on the website, that the articles that we write that do the best are by far the Canadian ones.
Really?
Because again, like with American or Trump stuff, we're competing with a million other outlets that are, I hate to say it, better funded than we are. They just have more money, more time to spend, more writers, more everything. But at least with Canadian stuff, there's a real hunger out there for not just jokes about Canada, but specific jokes.
Okay, we got 20 seconds left here. So Beaverton is a good place to go for comedy. You mentioned Jon Stewart, Rick Mercer. No, it's not Jon Stewart anymore. Trevor Noah now. Rick Mercer, who I think is in his last season at CBC.
Last season,
So we should check that out. Anything you want to add to that list?
Kim's Convenience.
Oh yeah, that's good.
On the CBC.
That's a good show.
It's much shrewder satire than people give it credit for.
There is more satire there than people give it credit for.
Oh yeah, the Canadian Archie Bunker is a Korean man. Fly the flag, man, we're awesome.
That's cool. Okay, I want to thank you three very funny people and one academic as well.
Also funny.
She had the
Also
hard
funny,
job. We
also
tried to
funny,
butt heads.
but also has information in the way you guys don't. For coming in today, Leanna Kersner, Ian McIntyre, Erica Petkov. Great to have all three of you around our table at TVO tonight. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Rock on.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.